But first, I'm getting a real sense of drift now from this Albanese government. No, it's worse than drift. It's more like headless chickens, a rabble, heading for a cliff, whatever metaphor you'd like. Now, if I were a Labor MP, I'd panic. I mean, just today, 3 more examples, all of them telling you there's no leadership, there's no direction. Something's broken. 3 examples. And I'll leave the most telling one to last. The government finally realising its net zero target is a disaster and we're running out of power and, oh my God, panic. But to number 1, the Prime Minister today refused yet again to call out China for its unprovoked and deliberate attack on one of our Navy helicopters while the chopper was in international waters. A Chinese jet fighter dropping flares above it and in front of it. Anthony Albanese again refused to call this an attack. He again called it just an incident. And he again made out it was just some sloppy work by a Chinese pilot. Unprofessional, he keeps calling it, when in fact it was a very deliberate and very professional act of aggression.
This action by China was unprofessional and unacceptable. We've made that very, very clear.
I just don't get Albanese's word games here. I mean, does he think the rest of us are now going to think, oh, that's okay. Oh, it's just an incident. Oh, no biggie. And it's just a little lack of professionalism by China's pilots. I mean, we know that's not true, and it just makes Albanese look like a fool, and worse, weak, clueless. In fact, I should point out, our Prime Minister still won't pick up the phone to China's dictator and say, what the hell are you up to? And then the second thing today, another bad day for Labor. The spending of money by this government. I mean, no wonder inflation is not coming down like it should. But the spending today was even worse because it rewarded the incompetence of the worst government by far in Australia, which is still Victoria's Labor government, not the federal one. Now, I warned a couple of nights ago that the rest of Australia would be forced to bail out Victoria with a net debt that's now headed to $190 billion, would you believe? More than the debt of New South Wales, Queensland and Tasmania combined. But you know what I didn't realise? That part of that bailout would come just 2 days later, today. An extra $3.5 billion of your money announced by Albanese for just one Victorian road project, the North East Link, bringing now Anthony Albanese's handouts for that road to $5 billion.
We believe this $5 billion is an appropriate contribution by the Commonwealth to what is a vital nation-building project.
Now, I said this was rewarding failure or maybe incompetence really, because 5 years ago, Victoria's Transport Minister, Jacinta Allen, now the Premier, she was standing there next to Albanese, put out a press release saying, don't worry, we've got this. Our budget delivers every single cent needed to build North East Link, which turned out to be another Labor lie, another Labor disaster. In fact, Premier Allen last December admitted this one road project alone had blown out, in fact, by $10 billion. And she's now rattling the can. And along comes Albanese, rushing in to rescue his socialist left ally with billions from Australians who aren't Victorians, but are now on the hook for the Victorian government's incompetence. A blowout, which Albanese today simply brushed off.
Infrastructure is costing more. It's costing more because of, and that is right around the nation, the supply chain issues that came arising out of the long tail of COVID has had a major impact.
The two incompetents sitting there. If they were in business, they'd be fired. But to the third and biggest sign today of a government that's lost the plot. This government today realised, its big promise to help stop global warming by cutting Australia's emissions to zero net by 2050 was in fact heading us all to disaster. Now, it's no surprise to you and I, of course, because how often have we been talking about this target not just being impossible, but bound to smash the economy. I mean, the cost of it. And the shortages already of electricity and gas. You know your power bills through the roof. In fact, electricity prices are so terrible already that top food companies are this week warning that power prices and wage rises too are now making it too hard for manufacturers to stay in Australia. And already we've seen some pack up. I mean, God, future made in Australia, my foot. Well, today the government said, oh, you know, actually we do really need to get more gas supplies. So forget banning fossil fuels. We've got a plan because we need gas for many years, in fact, decades to come. And we have this new plan to do it.
There has to be a discussion and an assessment of how all energy sources fit within that journey to net zero by 2050.
Now, Albanese repeated that today, not very enthusiastically, I must say. And in fact, he was standing right next to that Labor Premier, Victoria's, of a government that actually banned all gas exploration in the state for a decade and which still bans fracking.
We support net zero. Gas and its firming capacity is a part of assisting with that pathway.
Okay, all very well. Now, you know, more gas, more gas, more gas, except for this. Labor is saying it wants more gas, but saying only just for now, you know, net zero, we've got to get rid of fossil fuels. Now, you tell me which company wants to risk, look, it's tens, sometimes hundreds of billions of dollars of investment on a promise of a business just for now. You've got to be kidding. And don't forget, this is a government that meanwhile gives millions of dollars to green activist groups to stop or delay huge gas projects in our courts. We've seen that in Western Australia, we've seen that in the Northern Territory. People say, oh, Rainbow Serpent, activist lawyers funded by Labor, holds a project up in the court. And there's another thing. Meanwhile, we have got banks actively sabotaging gas development. The ANZ, for instance, this week announced it's no longer going to lend money to open new coal or gas fields, nor will other banks. You know, global warming, banks of a conscience, get off our back, don't invade our meeting, don't make our life hell. These banks are saboteurs of Australia's future. So look, you know, while Labor keeps feeding the global warming scare, while it keeps funding green lawyers to stop gas projects, while it still subsidises green power instead to drive fossil fuels out of business, we're still headed to an energy crisis. This may be now a government that's speaking from both sides of its mouth on this great green cause. You know, yes, net zero, but please, more gas. What jokers. I mean, really, chasing their own tails, and not just on this issue. Immigration, we haven't even talked about that. While Australians get poorer and poorer, and Australia heads for the cliffs.